Okay, this is part one of cell respiration. We talked about photosynthesis. We're now going to talk about cell respiration. What will probably happen is you'll have a test on the two combined. It won't be like the AP structured one, but it'll be a test probably next week. So, respiration is actually a little bit more simple than photosynthesis. Um, you have to breathe and eat to create energy for your body. Specifically, the energy is going to be ATP, and this is actually what it looks like. Adenosine triphosphate. Um, it's an adenine group, it's a sugar, and it has three phosphate or a triphosphate group. Um, yeah. It is the cell's energy, and basically, energy is released when, sorry, was interrupted. Um, so ATP is going to provide energy every time one of the three phosphates is broken off. That releases energy, and then it's basically sewn back or fused back on, and it stores the energy again. The phosphate bonds are what we call high energy bonds. They are very strong bonds that when they're broken, they release energy. So we won't worry about this. We'll come back to this image again, so don't worry about this right now. So when we look at the bigger picture, we know that the photosynthesis and respiration work hand in hand. That without the production of certain things through photosynthesis, you won't have the stuff available to make ATP in the mitochondria. And the big picture is the light energy that enters into the chlorophyll is going to ultimately exit us and other organisms as a heat energy when we are using ATP. So the chemical reaction that is cellular respiration that transfers electrons between reactions is called a redox or an oxidation reduction reaction. Oxidation means that a substance loses electrons or it is oxidized, and reduction, it means that a substance gains electrons or is what we call reduced. And so basically what's happening is electrons are being moved from one substance to another, creating the oxidation reduction reaction. For example, when we look at methane, CH4, which is a gas, we could call it the reducing reagent, whereas oxygen is the oxidizing reagent. Basically, what happens is CH4 becomes CO2, becomes oxidized, and if we look back, we know oxidation is the loss of electrons, and we see that CH4 loses a bunch of electrons in this exchange. The oxygen becomes reduced. If we look back, reduction, it gains electrons. We see that the H2O, the oxygen, gains electrons and also hydrogens. How does this work in cellular respiration? The glucose molecule that we ingest is actually going to be oxidized. So hopefully we know that oxidation means that it's going to lose electrons, whereas my oxygen that I inhale is going to be gaining the electrons. It's going to be gaining the electrons, and it's going to produce water and CO2 are my outputs. The other molecule that we have to be cognizant of is NAD and NADH. This is a hydrogen carrier, similar to in photosynthesis. We see that NAD it doesn't have the hydrogen, NADH it does. And so we see that it either has the extra hydrogens or it does not. Respiration is both aerobic and anaerobic, requiring oxygen and not, but it's often referred to as aerobic respiration because we are breathing, so technically it requires a little bit of oxygen. The second part of it, similar to like the Calvin cycle in plants, doesn't require oxygen. Although carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are all consumed as fuel, we usually just trace glucose as the one thing that's producing the most energy. There are these basically three big events: glycolysis or glycolysis. This breaks down glucose into two pyruvate molecules. So when I first eat my food, the first thing that's going to happen is glycolysis, and it's going to break down the glucose molecules. The citric acid cycle is going to complete that breakdown, and then oxidative phosphorylation is where ATP synthesis actually occurs. So really, cellular respiration is three chunks of activities. Why do we have to eat? That question is now we're seeing a lot more complicated than we understand. So this is where we'll pause. There'll be about 2 more videos for Wednesday that you'll need to watch.